Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Hidden by Yar. I've got a very special guest for you today. He goes by William Enclosure. He's a very good friend of mine. We met on Discord, actually, didn't we, William?
Yes, we did. Long
We met
time
on
ago.
GDN server.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Um, why don't you tell the hidden ones? This is what I call my followers or viewers hidden ones or the
hmm
hidden. I'm going to think of
I'm
a
a
proper
hidden
name.
one. I'm a
You're a
hidden
hidden
one.
one, of course. You're a hidden
Yeah.
one. You're a hidden one. Why don't you tell them a bit about yourself? Not too long of introduction. I'm asking more questions
hmm
later, but just a quick introduction of who you are, and maybe your social medias, what you do, etc.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I am William Enclosure. At least online, I am William Enclosure. And I, I mean, what do I say? I don't really know. I don't really have too much to say about myself. I work in media. I love God, and I really just try to follow what he says.
Mm.
And also, right, like you said, I'm on Gideon server as a mod. I'm also, me and a few friends, we have a podcast called Hope Dealers on YouTube. So you can check that out. People can also check out my regular YouTube channel, William Enclosure, right? And more stuff's going to be coming up there. It's also another channel that I have, kind of, which is entitled GC. No, wait. Yeah, it's GC. Wait, wait. All right, I'll put it in. I'll put it in the show
We'll
notes.
put it. We'll put it in
But
the description. We'll put
yeah,
everything.
you put everything in the description. But
We'll put everything
check
in the
those
description.
things out. I'm pretty much chill guy, nothing too crazy about me. But it's very interesting how we all met and got together though. So that's a pretty cool story.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm gonna ask you some personal questions. Just kind of
Mhm.
people to kind of get to know you a bit more. So I guess the first question would be, what was it like growing up as a SDA, like as a kid? Going through
Mm.
pathfinders, going through junior Sabbath school. What was it like being, and like what was it like growing in the SDA church
Mhm.
amongst SDAs, and then what was it like telling people your age that you're SDAs outside of the church and that experience as well?
That's a really good question because
Yeah.
when you say that, the first thing I think about is I didn't really have to interact with people outside of the church until I got to college, until I got
Mm,
to university, because I grew up, of course, in the SDA church. My mom was a teacher at the local SDA school,
mm,
which, I was around since she was a teacher. That was kind of like my preschool. So I was
mm,
there for like, before I entered kindergarten, which is the first place that you go.
mm,
Then K through 12, right? In the US, we go from K through 12. So all of those years, I'm basically just around SDA people. Um, it was literally only when I got to the university because I didn't I wasn't sure if I was gonna go to a Adventist university.
yeah.
But then I got an opportunity to do something called early admissions, which allows
Mm,
you to go to college a year early, and they also like pay your scholarship and everything. So I went to the local university, University of the Virgin Islands. By the way,
mm,
I am from the Caribbean, from St.
mm,
Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands.
mm,
So I went there, and that was really the first time I interacted with non-Adventist Christians or just non-Adventist people in general. And I was
mm.
scared. I,
Why?
I, I don't
What was
know.
what was scary about it? What was scary? Tell us.
It was like a culture shock because when you're around a certain people, you think anything outside of that is different, you know? I
Mm,
didn't know that all people were just regular people, like all other people.
mm,
So you think like, okay, these guys are into this or into that. Like, will I be able to have a regular conversation with them? But of course, all of this comes from, this type of background. I just was naive.
Mm.
So when I went and I realized, wait a minute, no, everybody's just regular. I was like, okay, all right, that's cool, that's cool. But growing up in the faith, it was really, at least to me, it was really good, because one thing about being an Adventist is that you're taught to really search the scriptures, right?
Yes.
In a holistic fashion, right? So there was never, like, even if I had questions, it was never a real issue, because there were always answers to the questions. So I was able to, really know my Bible, be able to read it and understand it. And also, when I was growing up, I was really into prophecy. Like, I like to tell people, the two books that I read, you didn't have to tell me to read these two books. The two books that I read was Revelation and Songs of Solomon. Those are my two favorite books. So I really like prophecy. You don't have to worry about why I read Songs of Solomon. But I really
was gonna ask because Songs of Solomon, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a bit, you know what I mean? Like, it's a bit, yeah. That's what I'm thinking in my head, huh? But I'll let you explain.
I love Songs of Solomon. What do you mean? Of course, like, listen,
it's
love.
a bit
We all love
romantic,
love, right?
It's a bit like a romantic type. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, but like,
Interesting.
just off of the energy of like what was interesting in the Bible to me, right? So for example, when I read I think it's Revelation 9, where it talked about the locusts, right? That was like, it was like a movie for me, right? I was like, yo, they're gonna have locusts at the end of time. Now later I came to find out that the locust was actually symbolic. Maybe one day we'll talk about it. But just like those things were super interesting to me. So growing up in the faith, I was able to really like explore those interests and come to, what I believe are the correct conclusions based off of evidence, and be able to see kind of where we're going in time, what the situations are. Also, you had things like Pathfinders, you had things like Adventurers, you had those events coming together with those people, and all of that was always good. Have lots of great memories from those times. But I wanted to ask you, and I asked you before the show, if I could ask you one question. So, well, maybe two, but this is my one question. How is it growing up in the Advent faith for you?
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you for asking me a question there. In response to your question, I think growing up in the Adventist church is interesting because to everyone that's not an Adventist, it's a cult, it's weird, it's peculiar, it's something that it's not it's strange. It seems like, they're like Jehovah's Witness or whatever, or Mormons. But as someone that's in the Adventist church, I don't think you could feel any more Christian than being an SDA. Like, there's nothing about SDA, and I try to be pretty objective and think outside of the box. But every time I attend the SDA church, it feels Christian to me in every way. I mean, people have issues with, LNGY or etc., and even those issues aren't really founded on anything when you really investigate them. But on a day-to-day, when we go to church, we open the scriptures, we study the Bible, and the Bible alone, majority of the time. In even our eschatological model is very detailed and very complex. And so far, track record wise, it seems to be on point with the things that have been fulfilled and the things that are soon to come to pass. Exactly. So I'd say to answer your question in short, the SDA church is like the remnant church. It's like the modern day version of the early Christian movement. It's like the remainder of that. If you want to experience what the Messianic movement, the early Christian movement was doing, it was something similar to the SDA church. I know there's the Messianic Jewish movement as well, which also keeps Sabbath and the dietary. So there's obviously adjacent denominations and communities that practice worship in the same way that we do.
Yeah.
But something I would say that's more palatable for everybody, whether Jew or Gentile, the SDA church is definitely a modern example of early Christianity, and it's
Yeah.
retained a lot of key elements. So yeah, that's how I would describe growing up in. If I felt like, bro, it was elite. Like Sabbath school is elite, bro. Like the way we'll be breaking down, even like Samson smiting someone with a donkey jaw, like it was
Yeah.
broken down on a detailed level. Our Bible studies as kids was detailed. We had Revelation and
Oh
Daniel
yeah.
boot camp. We were breaking down the mark of the
Yeah. Oh
breaking down the mark of the at 10
boy.
years old, bro. Do you think those people in Sunday churches, they're breaking down the mark of the beast at 10 years old? They're looking at Noah's Ark, doing the coloring books. They ain't sitting there, Revelation 21. What does it say, Hidden by Ya? What does it say, William? And you have to recite
Right.
it. And you have to memorize. Come on, bro.
Right. Dude,
SDA,
like
SDA is elite. SDA is elite, bro.
dude, like, because that's the thing, right? Like when I ask, right? Because people say, like, okay, you're not in the right place, what they're teaching is falsehood, right? I always ask them, okay, can you tell me definitively what these prophecies mean? And at the end of the day, I can never get a definitive answer, right? I don't believe that God's word is in such a place where we can't have answers to our questions, where God hasn't told us what it is, right? What I believe is that when people find out what it actually is, if they don't like it, they default to, I'm not sure. Instead of defaulting to, okay, this is what it is, now I have to lock in, right?
Right.
But dude, like, that's so real. Like, when I was growing up, every year there was a Daniel and Revelation seminar. Every year, bro.
Yep.
You had like you said, you had Sabbath school where they break it down. In your home, you breaking it down, right? And the beautiful thing about the word is that there's always more to discover. So even as they're breaking it down, you're understanding certain things, right? So it's so crazy. I know for sure when we were younger, at least people knew Daniel 2.
Yep.
As children, we knew Daniel 2 top to bottom.
Nebuchadnezzar statue. Yeah, we knew all of that.
Because we knew that top to bottom. They had the image, and that's the funny thing. Like, you only find Adventists with like talking about that image. I don't see another church talking about that image. Like, that's basically one of our mascots, low key. But, yeah. But I agree with everything you said though. Like, I think it was a good experience. I know people who might have had like bad experiences, but usually they're on like a personal level, right? So if it wasn't like a personal thing, and even the detractors of Adventism who came up in it, I don't think they would say that they had bad experiences in the denomination itself. So I don't know if we want to go into this just yet, but the detractors of Adventism. Oh yeah, and this is what we're talking about, by the way.
Yeah. This is the image.
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold, Babylon, breastplate of silver, Persia, the thigh of brass, Greece, the legs of iron, Rome, and the feet of iron and clay, the divided Roman kingdom, European Union. So I mean, these are the things that we were breaking down as kids, like next level stuff.
Children, we eat the cornflakes. You go to church with the image. You're like, yeah, what does this mean? Yeah. Like that. So when like, for example, right, I ask people about how you feel about prophecy, right? And they're like, it's scary. And for us, it's not really scary because we grew up with it. So it's not like a thing to be afraid of in understanding. And if you look, like you were saying, going back in history with the other things, right? The other people, like saying that this denomination is very close to early Christianity. When you look at the reformers,
Mhm.
They basically taught a lot of the things that we still teach, which many do not teach, right? If you ask the, because we're not going to get into it right now, but if you ask the reformers who they identify certain people as, they agree with us. Well, we agree with them actually, right?
Say it, William. By the way, don't say certain people here. Say what it is, dog. You're talking about the Roman Catholic. You're talking about the Roman. You're talking about the Pope.
I thought you were trying to get back.
No. There's another boogeyman. There's another group we don't mention here, but we can mention the Catholics. They can get it. We can mention.
All right.
So say how it is. Say Catholic Church.
Okay,
Bro.
so in that case, let me see if I can send you an image right now. Let me see if I can find it.
Because we ain't scared of the Catholic Church over here. There's other groups that we don't mess with, but the Catholic Church, they can get it, bro. They can get it. Okay, we'll tell you about horror stories in Discord in a minute because we've had some horror stories with these guys.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna send you just one image. I don't know if it'll come up here or where it will come up, but you're right. Yeah. So, but my point is, right, that the work, like the way that we understand the Bible is the way that the reformers understood the Bible, right? So that's one of the beautiful things, right? Because we got to get to the next question. But when you come to a place where you start speaking like denominations that used to persecute you, you're in a dangerous place, right? So majority of Christianity is Protestant, right? And I love my Catholic friends. I have Catholic friends. I love them, right? You know this. But for the Protestants in the world, right, it's so important to go and research the history of how you became a Protestant. Right now, right? So what we're looking at right there, right, is most, if not all, and there's more, right, of the reformers, right? Of all the people behind, whether you're Baptists, your Presbyterians, your Methodists, your I don't know, whatever else, your Church of God. I'm not sure exactly, but these are who they identified as the, either the beast or the, little horn in prophecy, right? The man of sin, Revelation 13, Revelation 17, harlot. They all identified them as basically one thing, right? America was founded on, like, this is one of the principles America was founded on. Boy, it gets too deep. It gets too deep. Next episode. Ask me the next question.
Bro, I'm glad you sent me this because I've been talking to some people and they're making it sound like we're innovating. What do you mean? The little horn is papacy. What do you mean the fourth beast? I'm sitting there thinking, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure we're not the only one that I've said this before. I know the early reformers probably had the same opinion, and to see that this is factual, that they did have similar opinions, this deserves a video within itself, bro. Just to kind of diffuse the lie.
I'm gonna forward more of this to you right here because I only sent you one. I'm gonna forward the rest if I can. There you go. That's just half.
That's a lot,
Yeah, no, like this is not new. This is actually old, right? And what's so interesting about the Bible, right, about the Word of God, is that there is a shift to a type of Christianity that wants to go back to the old ways, right?
Yes.
But the question is, what are the old ways? When you look at history and you look at from Jesus's time until the founding of one universal church in the world, one universal Christian church in the world, you see that a lot of things that Jesus was doing, church is not doing. And if we, and this is one reason I'm glad I came up the way I did, because it's easy to fall back into the what they say is the orthodoxy, right? When the question is, what's really orthodox? Is it what the Bible says, or is it what people say? And I'm pretty sure there's a Bible verse for this.
Yeah, I can pull it up.
Let me see if I can find it. I'm to say it right now in 2 seconds. I should know all these verses, so shame on me. Matthew 15:9. Matthew 15:9 says, but in
Let me
vain.
pull it up.
Yeah, pull it up so we can read it, right?
Because
we do have to get to the next question. This could be a 4-hour podcast.
I know we could. Yeah, I just want to get this up so people can see as well. So this is Matthew 15 verse 9. Let me share my screen. There we go. So it should be sharing now. There we go.
Yeah.
Matthew 15 verse 9, and it states, you want to read it?
Sure. It says, but in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. So it's so interesting. We have to ask the question, do these commandments come directly from God, or do they come from men? Do they come directly from God and his word, or do they come from men? And so I just implore everyone who's listening to think about that question. Ask yourself, what's the history of this doctrine? Where did it come from? And if you can like root it to the Bible, then okay, cool. If you can't, then you have to ask yourself the question, okay, why was this put in place? And usually there's a reason that's beyond biblical reasons, like extra biblical reason why they put it in place. But next episode, we're going to talk all about that, man, since that's what we talk about.
Absolutely. And a quick thing to add to that before we move into the next question. It's interesting you brought that passage because people often forget, like obviously contextually, Christ was talking to the Pharisees, the Parashim, and a lot of the commandments and obligations that they were putting on the people of Israel weren't necessarily found in the Torah. So there were additions, extra burdens that they were putting on people as requirements that were not found in the Old Testament. And Christ is essentially saying, why follow the traditions of men and make them as if they are the commandments of God when God has already given you the commandments that you ought to keep? And I see that history is repeating itself because the same, obviously, modern day Christians would not follow the Talmud and the rabbinic traditions because they're made up, right? To some extent. But the apostolic traditions, that's okay. Those traditions are okay. So when Christ says the tradition, people are replacing the commandments of God with traditions of men. How is that not happening today? How has that not happened with apostolic succession and in many of the apostolic traditions? Well, the way that they damage control is they say, well, it's not just traditions because it's coming from people that, were companions of the apostles. And by that virtue, anything that is tradition by them is as if it's from God. But the Talmudic Jews say the same thing. They said that when Moses was on Mount Sinai, he didn't just receive the 613 commandments, the mitzvah. He also received the oral law. And that oral law was then disseminated to the elders, from Joshua to the elders, from the elders to the priests, from the priests to the men of great assembly, Ezra, and many of those that came out of Babylon. And then it led to the Pharisees, who then composed the Talmud. So there's this long list of succession. Same thing with apostolic succession. Oh, the companion of John, Polycarp. Oh, the companion of Luke, and then his companion, and then that person's companion. And next thing you know, 5 generations after, everything that guy says has to be legit because 5 generations before it was John.
Exactly.
How is that not the same thing? How is that not the same issue as with the Talmud? No one that follows apostolic can have any issue with an Orthodox Jew that believes in the rabbinic tradition, in the oral tradition. It's the same sort of claim. It's literally one person told another person told another person, and that's supposed to be the same level as the Bible? Oh,
I disagree. And people will say, like, well, we compiled the Bible. I believe the Bible was divinely inspired, and the compilation itself was divinely inspired. I think there's actually evidence to show, right, that the compilation was compiled before, any merged church from a specific location ever got their hands on it. And man, there's so much history that we can go into. Also, I think one thing that we have to remember that people forget, right? And that even I haven't even been thinking about for a long time, is they burned books. I don't think we understand the gravity of this, right? There's a, actually, I'll say this quote now, but, I can't remember it exactly, but it's basically the winners write the story.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah, so you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
During the Dark Ages, books were burned.
Yeah.
And I had a friend, Catholic friend. We were talking about this. We were talking about the literacy rate during the early church and during the Roman Empire, right? The Catholic Empire,
Mm-hmm.
when it was really strong before it got its deadly wound. And he was saying like because it's kind of like a little, it's like a circle, right? So I was saying, and I don't think that quickly, so I didn't think to say this to him, but he was saying, well, I looked in the history during, like, right after Jesus, 20 to 30% was the literacy rate. So 20 to 30% of everyone could read, right? When you got into the Dark Ages, guess how much percentage it was?
How many?
Guess.
5%.
It's 1%.
That's crazy work. 1% of the whole population could read.
1%. Yeah.
Is that a fact? Do I need to?
You can look it up.
Do I need to Jamie? Do I need to Jamie this, like Joe Rogan? Do I need to Jamie? Let me Jamie this.
Because I had to look it up myself. I did.
What percentage? So you're saying that the question is what percentage of people in the Middle Ages could read, right? Or the literacy rate? To say what was the literacy rate in the Middle Ages?
I think so. But I'm gonna look it up as well, because let's see what AI says. Or in the Dark Ages.
It says below 20%.
I'll have to find the link that I found that said that. It's probably in my chat with the guy I was talking to at the time, so I could probably find it.
I mean, even if it's below 20%, that's still really low.
Yeah, I mean, I think it says, what I'm looking at is the ability to write was restricted to less than 10% of men, and hardly any women possessed it. So it was less than 10% of men. This is History Stack Exchange I'm looking at.
Yeah, I can see that as well. Less than 10% is crazy work. So then, obviously, the 10% is the priests and scribes, etc.
So now the question is, like, was it because people couldn't read that the priest said, hey, let's just take the books, chain them to the podiums, and read to people? Or was it because they chained the books to the podiums that people lost the ability to read? That's a whole other question that we have to ask.
That's a whole other question. Yeah,
and
definitely.
And so, what's so funny, right? Because, by the way, I work at a radio station, right? And I had an interview this morning on my morning show, not my morning show, but I'm filling in for somebody on the morning show. And the guy, he's having a prophecy seminar. And I said, what would you say to people who are wondering if they can understand prophecy? And he said, well, prophecy is to be understood because we can read it. So the fact that you have the ability to read it, that's when things can be understood. And it's so interesting. When people have the ability to read the Bible, do we see a shift in Christianity? Every time people start to read the Bible, a massive shift in Christianity happens. So is very interesting. But yeah, no, like it's a beautiful thing to have access and be able to read and to understand.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my last question in regards to like personal questions before we move into the interesting, the juicy stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us a bit about your rap battle history. Now, a lot of you guys
Mm.
may not know this, but William obviously sounds like, scholarly, intelligent, and well put together. But this guy was a bad man. This guy was a rap battle king, bro. I've seen the rap battle skills myself recently, very recently actually. He won't admit this because he's trying to put that stuff aside.
Trying to put it
Right.
away, bro.
Tell us
Yeah,
tell us about your times when you were on the dark side and you were spitting the mic. Tell
for
us, tell
sure, for
us, tell us.
sure. I'll tell you
Yeah.
guys. So battle rap, if you're not familiar with it, is a cappella raps against two people, right? Make sure you
Mm,
rhyme. You have to have bars, basically. So you be dissing the other person, but it's really a lyrical test to see, how good you are lyrically. Are you better than the other person lyrically? Are you more witty? Are you smarter? Are you like just more skills, more intangibles than the person you're rapping against? That's really what it's about, right? So,
mm,
um, on the flip side of growing up in the SDA church, right? Um,
mm-hmm.
we and I think this is for everything, like you kind of, how do I say this? There is rebellion in the soul, and even in the SDA church, it happens. It's there, right? That rebellion, that rebellious spark, right? So I'm the youngest of three. So me, my brother, and my sister, back in the day, we used to sneak and listen to a little controversial, not controversial, but unholy music sometimes. We
Rebellious child.
were
Yeah. It's rebellious child.
shame,
Wow.
shame. I'm telling this for the next generation, so the next generation could do better. But we used to listen to some music that probably wasn't the best. Was like my brother, he started rapping, and of course he's my big bro. So I was looking up to him and I was like, yo, I like rap too, right? So
Mm,
I would like, practice myself and pretend and make up songs and things of this nature. Now back in the
mm.
day, I'm kind of aging myself, but back in the day, um, we used to have something called 106 and Park. I don't know if you know about that. 106 and
No.
Park, they used to have, okay. So 106 and Park, right? It was on a show because it's in America, by the way. So you might not know it because it's in America, but
Yeah.
you have they used to have something called Freestyle Fridays, right?
Wait, is that with Bow Wow?
Yeah,
Yeah, I do.
but
I
what
do know what that is. I do know
you
what
know,
that is. Yeah.
you had to dig it up in your mind. It was like, hold on, let me look at my files. Let me
I,
look at my...
I typed it in. Yeah, let me share my screen. As soon as I saw Bow Wow's face, I was like, yeah, I remember this because I think it was on MTV, right?
Yeah,
I remember this.
no, it
And
was
they
on
they used to
BET.
it was on BET, and
It was on
they used to have artists like and
BET.
interviewing them and stuff like that. I remember they did one with Kanye West and 50
50
Cent.
cents. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
did like
yeah.
I
You
remember
see,
this. I
you
saw
see
I
what's
saw, I
so
saw Bow Wow, and I was like, oh, I remember that.
what's so crazy is that when I used to watch it, it wasn't Bow Wow. It was those people, the guy with the black shirt. It was them. That's who I used to watch.
These ones, yeah, I remember these ones as well. I remember these two as well.
Yeah. So I used to watch them, but we didn't even have cable at home. So back in the day, I don't know if you remember, we had something called LimeWire. You remember LimeWire?
LimeWire. Nah, what's that?
Oh boy, oh boy. So just quickly, right? Now you live in an age of everything on the internet is accessible. You could just get it, right? LimeWire was the beginning of what you live in now. LimeWire was the genesis, it was the birth of that. So back in the day, we used to have to buy CDs from the CD store. We used to have to go in the store and purchase the latest CD for $15.99 if it was
I
on
remember those
sale.
days, William. I remember like
You remember?
banning
Okay.
CDs. I remember those days, bro. I'm not that
Yeah.
much younger than you, bro. I
Okay.
remember
Okay.
those days.
However, right, what happened
Right.
was people started, like, when the internet started to pop off, people started to share stuff online because you could play your album on the computer. You could send it out, right? You could like rip it and then you could share it with somebody. And LimeWire was a place you could share all of this content, right?
Mm.
And probably one day I'll break down more LimeWire stuff. But just to get to the point, right? I think around that time we were listening to battle rap. There was one of them that like made me say like, okay, now this is cool. But surprisingly, I never battle rap during that time. It was probably like 15 years later. I went to Germany where my brother lives, right? So all these years later, he's still listening to battle rap. I wasn't even tuned in, right? So because I was hanging out with him, I was listening and I was like, okay, let me get into this because my bro's into this, so we have something to bond over, right? And I was listening and I realized, at least for certain artists, I was like, there's people that's really terrible. I could probably rap better than them. And then I said, okay, you know what? I should start writing. So I started writing. My first bars were like bad, not good. And this was around, lockdown time. So lockdown happened. I'm online now, right? And I go on Twitter. And in Twitter spaces, they have people who are, just battling for fun, right? So I start hanging around and I'm like, man, I just want to do one battle or two battles, right? So I go ahead and I battle, right? And this is also like kind of like a testimony, like a little testimony, just like a lesson that I learned, right? So I got one battle, right, which was in like the trash league, the trash event. Like anybody who's not really that good, because the people that I came up with are official battle rappers right now. Like, and like I brought people into the game. I came up with people and they're like on the big leagues now. Like URL, like Eunice. I don't know, the people who know battle rap would know Eunice. I came up in the spaces that he came up in, right? So we was hanging in the same Discord servers at times and things of that nature, right? So came up with them. I battled on one trash card, right? And I was very bad. And I won the battle, even though I was very bad, because I did something very specific that made me win the battle. And then the next time, I actually prayed and I was like, God, because I was battling someone that I was very scared of, this guy named Big Low, right?
Why were you scared of?
Because he was good. He battled like one of the top guys and he held his own, right? And everyone was saying like, even though he lost, he did really well. And I was looking for a battle, but I was looking for someone who wasn't really good. But then but then he was the only one around. So I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna do it. And I was so scared. So I prayed and I was like, God, I'm gonna battle this guy. Help me to win. If I win, I'm never gonna battle again. That's what I said. And I like, and then you have other people in the space that help you and stuff, not like write your stuff, but like you spar with or whatever. So I wrote it, right, and to this date, it was the best battle I ever did. Like I killed the guy. I crushed him.
Is this now recorded on YouTube?
So it was recorded, but then something happened and that whole channel got deleted. So like if I search really hard, I could probably find like the first 15 seconds, but that's about it. So
gone on record of it.
I only have a little bit. I have the lines, I have the lyrics, but I don't have the recording. So I prayed and God came through, right? But I broke my promise to God. And ever since then, I never won another battle. Never won another battle. So
quick question. What made you stop rap battling?
Because of that prayer. Because the thing about battle rap, right, is that the type of energy that you need to do it isn't the type of energy that, basically is the best energy to have, especially if you're trying to live a Christ-like life, right?
The aggression, right? And the
Yeah.
mocking. Yeah.
Yeah. The aggression, it feels good though. It feels very good, but it's not like conducive to a witness that's super strong. So for example, there are Christian battlers in the space, right? And they're really good battle rappers, right? But they always get dissed for not being really good Christians because they're rapping, they're talking about shooting people, and they might win the battle, but at the end of the day, they're like the people around them, their lives are not changing. So I kind of knew, right? Like there are things that we do that are okay, but not the best option, right? So like when you're taking a test, right? If it's like a multiple choice, it always says fill in the best option. So I always have to ask myself the question: what's the best option? Not what's the okay, what's not the option that will make it happen, like will be okay, that you could survive on, but what's the best option? And I definitely think, especially the time that we live in right now, the best option is to just talk to people instead of rapping at them.
Absolutely. Perfect. Yeah. So now we've kind of learned a bit about your rap, about history, about growing up as SDA, and you kind of told us a bit about yourself. How did you become a mod in Gideon's server? Now, Gideon's server, for those that don't know, it's a Christian server. It's called, gosh, I forgot what it's called again. Is it called the Congregation?
Yeah.
Congregation. That's crazy, right? I forgot what it's called. But it's called the Congregation. I think it's the second biggest Christian server because I think the server count has kind of gone down now, right?
Yeah.
But it's the second biggest Christian Discord server in the world. Myself and William are mods in the server. I guess tell people kind of how you obviously encountered the server, and then also how you became a mod and how you met us and many of the other people on the server.
Yeah. So it all comes down to my friend actually told me about Gideon before, like a little bit before he became a Christian, a little bit before he became a Christian, he started to pop on my radar, right? So he was one of the bigger prank YouTubers, right? And one of the most beloved, right? Out of all of prank YouTube, because prank YouTube is kind of crazy and people be getting in trouble, dangerous stuff. They do crazy things, but he had a consistent base. He was on podcasts, he was on shows, and my friend kind of told me about him, and I was like, oh well, I don't really care about prank YouTube. I don't really like prank YouTube anyway. And then I don't know if I followed him for some reason, whether it was because I don't remember what it was. I felt like I was following him, but randomly, the night that he did his first post about giving his life to Christ, right, fully, I was watching. And I was like, yo, this is so crazy. If this guy who has way more than me can dedicate his life in this way and give up all that he has, like, what am I holding on to, right? So I said, you know what, like I'm gonna lock it. I'm gonna see what this is about. So after the first one, I think he did one stream with George Janko. Then he did the one video where he said he was stopping the pranks, and then he created the Discord and his new YouTube channel, Gideon. So I joined the Discord, right? And I'd already been on Discord because of Battle Rap. And while I was on Battle Rap Discord, I was like, man, I wish I could find a Christian Discord group. And I even looked for some, but they were dead, right? So when this came about, it was like a whole new world for me, where it was just a total Christian Discord. Gideon would come on, like he said, he had a schedule of Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, which was crazy. Thinking about how it is now, that was amazing. And I was in the chat talking to like just in there, and then I don't know how, because I feel like this happens. This is like the story for everybody of how they meet Cheesy. Like Cheesy just pops up, right, and starts interacting with you. So Cheesy started interacting with me, and so Cheesy is our mutual friend, right?
Yeah.
Also a big person in the Discord.
Mm.
But he started interacting with me, and I was just talking about, certain Bible books of the Bible that I really liked. And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a good one too, And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, come join this other server that we're in, which was called the Foundation. And when
Right.
I joined the Foundation, that's when I met Hidden. I met, a lot of different people that, became very close friends. And I don't know if anyone who's listening knows like internet culture, but like the way that it works nowadays is, how would I describe it? It's like there's a lot of interaction basically, right? And you could end up spending a whole day just hanging out talking with your friends on Discord, right?
Yeah.
And especially because you have the younger generation, right, who has more time on their hands, all of these different things. That's why people like Kai Cenat could blow up, because the kids come home from school, they have 4 hours to watch a whole
Mm-hmm.
stream, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to Discord, and also this was happening, during the lockdown times, where you had a lot more time, so you could do a lot more internet stuff. So around this time, we were spending a lot of time on the platform, right? Even myself, who has like a full-time job, and even some days, even recent, I still end up doing that a lot, which I'm trying to get away from spending so much time. But we spent a lot of time together, basically.
Yeah.
So we became fast friends, all of these different things. They when I came in, they knew I was an older guy. They, came to me for like wisdom, and they were like, yo, you should be a mod. But I knew at the time, and maybe I should have been earlier, but I knew at the time I was too busy like already to be a mod there, right?
Yeah.
So they had asked me a while back, and I said, you know what, give me until next year. So it was 2023. I said, give me until next year, 2024, right? So around like 2024, like I think middle of the year is when I became a mod. And I've been a mod ever since. I was a VC mod, then I became like a trial mod. But I said, you know what, don't elevate me anymore, because I don't need the responsibility.
Mm.
So yeah, but if there's anyone watching, I'm pretty sure we put the link for the congregation in the chat. You
Yes.
can join, and we have like events, we have Bible studies, we have morning devotions. You and me actually run a whole event together.
Right.
Yeah,
Debate event. We should
yeah,
record some of those sessions and put them on the channel on
it's
our
true.
YouTube.
Yeah,
Yeah, we should
no,
probably do that.
yeah, those are some cool events. So if anyone wants to join, y'all can
Mm.
definitely join. It's a fun time. It's a fun experience, and it's just yeah, it's pretty cool. So that's what I would say about that. There were a lot of bumps along the way. There were bumps on the road, and a lot of drama. But that's the
Well,
nature of the beast.
maybe I can kind of ask you about that. And obviously, for time's sake, I'll ask you about that
Mhm.
very briefly.
Yeah,
Because when I to get through some of the other things I wanted to discuss, but
yeah.
just very briefly, um, what's been your overall experience debating and conversating within the congregation? Obviously, conversating with Catholics,
Hmm.
once saved, only always saved,
Hmm.
Muslims. There's all these different types of religions. What's been your experience kind of debating and conversating with those religions?
It's been a very interesting experience, especially coming from where we're coming from. Two most
Right.
um to many religious organizations, they do not know about us. They don't know about Seventh-day Adventists. And they, also might have like, I wouldn't say incorrect information, but like just a negative view of Adventists from the standpoint of I like to say unorthodox, right? We're different. We're not like everybody else, right? So one key element, right, about the server, right, and one of the reasons that I joined is because when Gideon came to Christ, he started to keep the Sabbath, right, that we observe, and we know that is the Sabbath according to the Bible, right? So that was like huge for me because us, and like a lot of us are gonna be in there, right? So anyone who's worshiping on the Sabbath, spam. So when I went in there, I was like, oh, this is a wonderful place. People are worshiping on the Sabbath, right? Let's continue to study the Bible and to learn. So when coming into the server, a lot of the conversations that we started having, to me, were super edifying conversations because we came from the standpoint of Sabbath truth, right?
Yeah.
So now the conversation is something like feast days. How do we recognize feast days? The conversation is like, what, like the sanctuary conversation is like all of these different things. And at this time, because it was so new and so hot, like people were joining, asking Gideon questions. He was having debates with people, even the debates that, like, I know you had one with Gideon, and we were able to learn more about different things in the Bible we didn't see before. So to me, those types of conversations were very edifying, and it kind of got to a really good place.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened over time was different people came in that and people that came in kind of it became a more of a hostile place, and maybe hostile isn't the word to use, but the pool of views that we used to have became wider, right? So now to connect with someone is going to be more difficult, and also you're going to have more disagreements, which causes more division and more strife. And also, right, one thing about the internet is that everybody's an expert. But when I say that, I mean everybody is good at debating. So even our best debaters, right, will tell you step in on a certain time of a certain day, you in the belly of the beast. This is the hardest it's ever gonna be. You on level 10 immediately. So that's a part of it. I always tried to make my discussion structured, right? And I always tried to hit the points from different angles, because I know that there are those who can just go straight doctrinally, right? When I came, and maybe another time we'll talk about my, like, I guess I wouldn't say conversion story, but my, like, experience with Christ. But when I came into my experience with Christ fully, what I kind of realized is that there's an emotional element in the entire, like, Christian experience that is, I was like, if we don't address it, it's going to be our downfall. So I try to come to it from that conclusion, right? So I'll be 100% honest and transparent. If I would just hop in a VC and try to have a debate with someone, would I hold my own? Maybe. Would I do great? Would I smoke them? I can't say for sure. But what I would try to do is I would try to have something structured and be prepared, so I know what we're talking about and I can go through it in a systematic way. So what I used to do, and I need to get back to doing it, but I used to have, like, weekend Bible studies, right? And we would talk about certain things, right? And I would
Mm-hmm.
always bring in a dissenting or like the opposition to talk about their view of it, right? And then we would have that discussion. It would be an amicable discussion. So it's a really, I mean, to me, that was a really good way to go about it. But the honest truth is that is you gotta be tough. You gotta have some thick skin in there.
That's so
You
true, William. So true,
Yeah.
William.
What about
Um,
what about your
I
experience
would
with
like
that?
to ask you, I like to, oh, thank you, bro. I want to ask you the next few questions just for time's sake,
Okay.
because we're kind of, yeah, it's running over. But I guess from my experience, yeah, I'd say it's the same thing. It's quite aggressive congregation.
Mhm.
Generally, like especially when we had a lot of influx of Catholics come in. Um, SDA tends to get a bad rap generally. We're often lumped together as, culty kind of group. So we're always having to kind of diffuse falsehoods.
Yeah.
It's not really a safe space, I would say. It's more safe now than it was before,
Yeah.
because we've kind of made sure that people
I
are,
think I think at the beginning and the end it was safe. At the beginning it
yeah,
wasn't necessarily safe, but that was just the beginning because like for example, right? Like there used to be a time where you didn't have to argue for Sabbath keeping in the server. That was like a given, more or less. You could argue for other things, but Sabbath keeping, that was basically a given. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, and I agree with you.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the next question I want to talk about is more so like veganism and being plant based. Now, I'll be completely honest. As an SDA, I've always known that we've been taught health message, right? And for those that don't know, essentially this idea that as we move into the end time, God is calling us to move away from eating meat and becoming more healthy and plant based generally, right? And obviously, when you look at the negative effects of eating, factory farmed animals, processed meat, you can see there is an argument there in regards to it causing inflammatory diseases, cancerous tumors, etc. And even the World Health Organization recognizes that a more plant based diet is generally healthier. So, I guess my question for you, and very briefly, kind of tell us about your transition to veganism, as well as your views on it, whether or not it's essential for salvation or it's just for optimal living.
Okay. So just quickly, right? I grew up in the church, right? And the way that we were taught, right? So it's two things that happened, right? My mom used to read Spirit of Prophecy. If you know
Mm,
that, that's some books we believe, Ellen G. White, and she was a messenger from God, right? So if you read a lot of her stuff, right, it's very informative to the health community today, because back in the day, a lot of people don't know this, is that Adventists were known for the health message to the outside world, right? They even had like a documentary on PBS about it, which is our BBC. And celebrities would go to the sanitariums, our sanitariums, to get healthy when they were feeling sick or out of it. Yeah, so the celebrities of the time would come to our sanitariums, right?
mhm.
Fun fact, the Kellogg's guy, he was our guy.
Mm.
So basically, we invented cornflakes. Anyway, I'm not gonna harp on that. But
I mean, let's definitely not hop on Keller, because I'm sure you know the things
yeah,
surrounding
no,
him
that's a
as
whole
well.
different story. But still, he came up with that in a sanitarium, in an Adventist sanitarium. But point is, right, so my mom would read Spirit of Prophecy, and but our church, our local church, wouldn't really talk about the health message in terms of plant-based eating, right? So it
Mm,
was like you were hearing two things at the same time. So we had like a local health food store that was sponsored by the church, right? That you could get health food products, right? Also, Adventists ate meat. I mean, I ate meat
mm,
because it was this kind of like there were two messages coming out, right? Because of course we believe in the biblical laws of health, right? Which and the biblical laws to meat eating, which we still believe in. But also we got more information right, that ended up being true. So for me, at least, I grew up eating meat, right? Not all the time though. So I was used to eating veggie food and plant-based food. But every once in a while, my dad would take us out. We would go and go to KFC, get some chicken, So it was not like a problem, right? It was only as I started to grow more and read more that I realized what was actually happening when I, at least I would eat the food that wasn't plant-based. And I'll actually tell you what really made the big switch for me, right? So there was a time, right, where, and this kind of goes into my testimony, like I was depressed, right? I was like chronically depressed, and it was hard for me to function just in real life, right? And I emailed a church that I would watch on YouTube, right? An Adventist church I would watch. And I told them like I was going through this depression, right? I felt like I was lost. I felt like I was going to hell, and there was nothing that could save me, right? So I got an email back from them, and they said, "Hey, did you know that depression can be cured based on what you eat?" And I was like, "I didn't know this." They said, "Yeah, your gut bacteria actually controls your brain function. And if your gut bacteria is messed up based off of what you eat, you know, with flesh foods that basically rot in your stomach and just make you sick, right? You can overcome this depression." And it wasn't just that, but it was definitely a lot of prayer, a lot of soul searching, like really pouring my heart out to God that got me out of that place. But it was also the change in the food that I was eating. And so I started eating more plant-based. I even started cooking. I had a crock pot. I used to put stuff in the crock pot and cook. And I was really happy. I was really happy. Now, so through that as well, it helped me to realize how important the health message is, right? And of course, over time, I kind of fell out of it sometimes, fell back into eating meat. But as time progressed and I kept practicing, right, I got way better. And it's easier for me to just stick to the plant-based lifestyle that I'm trying to practice now. So going to your second question about, is it necessary for salvation? I have a question for you. Is smoking cigarettes a sin?
Yes, because it's damage to
Why?
the temple. Because your body's
Praise,
a temple. It's self harm. Smoking
praise
cigarette. There's
God.
no health benefit really to smoking a cigarette. It's self harm.
Praise God. That answers the question.
Well, I could argue with you on is there health benefits to eating meat? I mean,
No, well, here's the thing, right? Doctors used to believe, no, but honestly, doctors back in the day, in the 1900s, your favorite athlete, if you were living back then, was probably smoking a cigarette for health benefits. Because that's what the doctors used to prescribe cigarettes to buy to the people on the Tour de France because
again,
they thought
William.
it helped with lung health.
Again, William. I'm not going to argue with SOP. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to argue with health message. But one thing
Mm-hmm.
I can say about meat consumption generally, the Messiah himself ate meat. The
Yes,
apostles themselves ate meat. So meat within
absolutely.
itself, if meat is going to now be or is going to be considered a sin, then you would have to be saying that the patriarchs were sinning, but and God forbid you'd be saying that Christ as well. So I think the distinction would have to be you would have to maybe say the meat is the different, or you'd have to say
That's the distinction, though. The meat
okay,
is not healthy. The meat that we get nowadays is not healthy. Like, if you want to go deep with it, like most of the foods is not healthy. But the thing with meat though is that you put unhealthy food, like, whatever, like let's say you have unhealthy food in a package of, what you call it again, in a package of flesh, right?
Mm, mm.
That's like 10x's the unhealthiness of whatever the cow ate, whatever the chicken ate, right? Even if it was something healthy, if the food is like, because you gotta, like, there's so many aspects of the dieting process of like getting our food to our table
Yeah.
that we don't look at, that helps us to see like, okay, wow. And I don't want to spend too much time because we might have
Yeah.
to do just a whole other episode, right? I mean, I have
Yeah.
the time, but
I don't have the
I don't.
time.
Okay,
Buddy.
fair. But I'll say this, right?
Right.
In certain in certain situations, right? Like there are situations where there was someone in Antarctica and they were trying to be plant-based in Antarctica, and Spirit of Prophecy was kind of like, "What are you doing? You're in Antarctica. Eat the food you got to eat, right?" But when we have the options, however, I'm gonna say this: when we have the options to do the best thing, what do we choose? Do we choose the okay option, or do we choose the best option? Now, I'll say this, right? As a former meat lover, like, meat tastes good, but other foods taste good as well. And you know this to be true.
William, meat, it doesn't just taste good, it's delicious. Just to add that there, but continue.
So what? There's other foods that's delicious too.
Yeah, I think delicious is meat is definitely in that category. I'm sorry, like we're not gonna downplay.
Okay,
I
fine.
respect
Listen.
it. I respect what you've done. I want to get to that level at some point, but we're not gonna pretend that meat is not delicious, bro. We're not gonna pretend.
We
Like,
don't have
just
to
keep it
pretend.
real.
We don't have to pretend. Meat is delicious. Meat is
It
very
is.
tasty. And especially the texture, right? Which many plant-based eaters have been fighting to recreate for a very long time. But the best option, right, is the plant-based option, and is scientifically shown, is historically shown, is prophetically shown. And that's another thing I wanted to get to, but we can go to that because we have a few more questions to get to, right?
We do. So now we've kind of discussed about veganism. Let's talk about politics. I know this is within itself could be a whole show,
Yeah.
but obviously, Trump is president. Big up Trump. Make America great again. I probably should have said it with my face showing.
You can say that. You can say that. No, that's fine.
Yeah, it's okay now, isn't it? So, as an Adventist, right? Obviously, you'd believe that there should be a separation between church and state, and that when church and state unite, typically it's not a good thing. I mean, when we look at Jezebel, right, and I think it's King Ahaz, that's a union of church and state, and that didn't really, or false church, because it's not really the real church. She was a false, she was a pagan, right, and she was essentially amalgamating the pagan culture and ideas with the state of Israel, and due to that religious amalgamation, mandates were made around religious perspectives. Whereas we believe in the separation of church and state because then it allows us to be autonomous with our own religions and not have to follow the religious mandates of a government, particularly. So, for instance, countries that follow Sharia law, those are perfect examples of religion and state because the religion is tied to the mandates, to the governmental structure. Everything that they're doing, whether or not it's women wearing coverings, not eating certain things, not drink. This is all about the religious legislations that have now been infused in the government. Whereas in a lot of secular countries, it's about a lot more liberal, meaning it's usually based on multiple mitigating factors to determine what is law, what's mandated. Obviously, even within secular communities, there is a biblical foundation to some extent. Like obviously, America, even though it's mostly secular, there's still a biblical foundation somewhat to the government. But they've tried to separate church and state. So I guess my question is, how do you feel about Christian nationalism growing in America, especially after Trump's second term as president, there's a growing movement of Christian nationalism. And what is your perspective of that prophetically as an Adventist?
It's scary. It's scary because America was founded on the separation of church and state, right?
Right.
By Christians, right? So here's the issue. Oh man, there's words that I won't say on this channel, but America used to hate certain groups, right?
Right.
Why? Because these groups persecuted the founding members of the colonies. The reason that America started is because people were running away from persecution. And you can even see this in Revelation, which I'm sure Cheesy could even show you. America was running away from the people who came to America, those 13 colonies, they were running away from persecution. So they could worship God according to the dictates of their own conscience. Now, remember what Martin Luther said. He said, to go against my conscience is neither right nor good. Other words, I don't recommend it. I'm a do what God is telling me to do in my heart, right? What we find now is that America is saying, and you're hearing people say, hey, we need to act like basically back in the day when religion was legislated. That's what we need to act like. And they will throw around words like magistrate, right?
Right.
That's just basically like the government, the president, your local governor, right? And they'll say things like, back in the day, the magistrate, under the magistrate's jurisdiction, they could tell you to follow these Christian laws, right? They could tell you can't do this or you can't do that. Or if you're doing something that they don't see as Christian, they could just stop you, right? They could stop your speech. They could stop your actions, all of these different things they could do. Now, if we want to make America great again, wouldn't we want to do what the founding fathers wanted? If they think that that's when America was great, then that's what we should be doing. Which would mean that certain groups would be kicked out of America. If we're being honest. But what's happening is, under like the guise of Christianity, what's happening is Christian nationalism. People are forgetting that this is a nation of immigrants that came together to worship God under the dictates of their own conscience. What people think is that America was basically built on God, which I believe it was, right? But that means that this land, this country, this nation is the nation of Christendom. And that's how it's supposed to be. So I think the deception is very deceptive. So, which means that people are not seeing it. And they're not going to see it, right? We paint in broad strokes as Christians, especially when it comes to the things that make us, inside feel like, I'm doing God's will, right?
Right.
But if we remember in Matthew 7, I don't know if it's Matthew 7:25, where it says, Lord, Lord, have I not prophesied in your name and cast out these demons and done all of these wonderful things in your name? And Jesus will say to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, workers of iniquity. The Christian experience is a personal experience of practicing righteousness, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is, a lot of times as Christians, we default to preaching versus practicing, right? And if we look historically and biblically, true godliness comes with persecution. So if you are the persecuting power, right? Basically what they're saying, we are going to persecute people who do not believe what we believe. If you are the persecuting power, is that true Christianity? Was Jesus a persecuting power? So that's the question that I would ask people. So I don't agree with it. I think America should stay church and state separate, but I think it's too late. I think it's gonna happen, and when it happens, people are gonna have to make a choice, and the right choice is gonna be the hardest choice.
Yeah, absolutely. So my last question about in regards to politics is, obviously, we've had, Ben Carson, he was an Adventist, who's now obviously widely known in the political space, run for president. Obviously, he didn't land the position. But what was your opinion when it was happening? What's your opinions now in regards to Adventists, particularly becoming a part of the political parties, running for presidents, running for mayor, being involved in politics in general? Because from my opinion, there is biblical cases of men of God running governments and politics. You've got Joseph becoming second in command in Egypt. You've got Prophet the Nebi Daniel running as the wise man for the King Nebuchadnezzar. So we have clear examples in the scripture of men of godly of a holy status working within government. So is there anything from your perspective, whether it's spirit of prophecy, whether it's just your understanding of the scripture, as to why you think that shouldn't be the case today, or whether or not you think it should be?
So those are some great examples that you used, and I use those examples as well, right? If we look at the examples of God's people in secular places of authority, there's commonality to how it happened. Usually they were appointed. So I believe in appointment, there is credence to work in government, right? If you are appointed. So I know personally people in local government who were Christian, who are Adventists, who were appointed, to specific places, right? Whether they were just working their government job, and they just climbed the ranks to become the head of a government organization, which really, once you're the head of a government organization, you're also running policy for that organization, right? Or other statuses. Because here's the thing with the Christian walk and the journey, right? There is a lot of credence in the allowing of God to direct your path, right? So in cases where God is saying, like, okay, I need you in this position of power, I think he will put you there. I don't think that of our own selves we necessarily run for offices, right? I've seen it done. I probably have to research more. I think that Spirit of Prophecy does say things about it in terms of, not running for office. But just from the Bible, I see that God puts us in the position he wants us in, right? So usually when things go well with someone, they were appointed, right? Even with people inside of God's government. So you have people like David, right? He was chosen, right? So that would be my stance on that. Is it would better to be appointed than to go out and run for the office, because there's a lot of dangers in the government system that can corrupt, and power corrupts. And we probably talk about it another time, but even with those who have run, like you were talking about Ben Carson, you kind of see that if there was a strong faith, if, like, how do I say this? you kind of see where the cracks could appear, right?
Right.
In terms of what you would have to do.
Exactly. And not only that, William, sorry to cut you, it would mean that Adventism is now more exposed. And yes, that's a good thing because we're trying to spread the gospel. But it also means that there's going to be more attention now. And anything he says is going to be tied to Adventism. And if he's not founded in the scripture, or he's not founded in the spirit of prophecy to the elite level, he could, like you said, slip, and it could affect all of us. So there is that danger of Adventists becoming mainstream and becoming political. But and even with what you said about being called to run rather than seeking it out, I think that's a brilliant thing you said, because even in the examples I'd given, I don't recall Joseph seeking out to become second in command, or Daniel seeking out to become the wise man. These things were given to them by God. So I think that's a very good distinction to make when people are trying to be in politics versus being called to be in politics.
Yeah.
So that was a really good answer there. That's all the questions I have for you at the moment. Of course, we'll definitely be doing a part 2 or going deeper into particular topics. I guess my final question would be, what is the most impactful quote that you've heard in your life, whether it's the scriptures or whether it's secular, whatever it may be, or SOP, that you heard that you, to this day, it sticks with you and, puts you on the right track?
All right. So there's two things that my dad said. One of them is a Bible verse. It's Jeremiah 12:15. And then there's another thing that he said. The Bible verse is, I'll just go ahead and read it.
Where is that? Can I pull it up?
Yeah, Jeremiah 12:15. That's one that I know. I believe I know. 12:15. Oh, no. It's 12:1. My bad. 12:1. Let me try 12:1. Hold on. Is this it? Load. Oh, no, I can't find it. Wow. Shame on me. Is it 12:12? Hold on. I don't think so.
How does it go? I can just type in.
It says, basically, it goes, because Jeremiah, right, was complaining to God, right? And he was like, yo, God, I can't deal with these people. They just talking a bunch of nonsense. I don't like it. And God said, the first thing God said to him was, if you cannot run with the footmen, how are you supposed to run with the horsemen? And if in the time of peace, it bothers you, what are you going to do in the flooding of the Jordan? And that's one of my favorite Bible verses, because it reminds me that we have things good now. Things are good now. Like, look at us. Look at us. You got a background behind you. I look like I'm talking into a big mic. I got phone behind me. In 12:5. See, 15:5. Jeremiah 12:5. So we have to get it together now, while we have the time, while we have good situations happening to us, versus when the time comes where the things really get hectic.
Yeah.
What are we going to do during those times? So that verse always sticks out to me. And then another thing that he always said that I always thought was funny is he always said, cards and dice is the devil advice. That's it.
Perfect. All right, William. Thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we can maybe start this a bit earlier next time so we can have more time.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you joining this. And of course, this won't be the last time. We'll be doing much more content in the future.
For sure.
Before I'm closed the podcast, is there anything you'd like to tell the viewers? And then also just again to shout out and plug, where they can find you.
Yes. So you can find me on most social medias. You can find me on Instagram at William Enclosure. Actually, that's the one I'll give out. William Enclosure on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube, William Enclosure on YouTube. You can find me on the Hope Dealers YouTube channel as well. So, YouTube/Hope Dealers, or just type in Hope Dealers, and you can find me there. You can also find me in the congregation. We're doing things there. Like, I'll plug my radio, well, not my radio station, but the radio station I work for is WGOD Radio. If you want to listen to a great gospel radio station, you can go there. That's wgodradio.org. Again, that's wgodradio.org. You can watch us live. You can just listen to the audio. So we have all of those capabilities as well. And of course, if you want to, you can donate to that ministry as well.
Perfect. And again, we'll be putting everything in the link in the description below. And yeah, please check out his stuff, guys. And again, William will be here again. We'll be definitely going deeper into, veganism, prophecy. Might even do like a prophecy series and just go through Daniel. And
I think we could.
Yeah, we should definitely do something like that. But yeah, any final closing statements before we close?
Y'all subscribe to the channel, like, share, subscribe. You already know the vibes. Easy.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. Yes, as you heard, like, share, and subscribe. But we'll be doing much more content in the future. I hope everyone was blessed by this conversation. And stay hidden in truth, hidden ones. That's going to be my slogan now. I'm going to come up with something better for now. I'm going to use that for now. All right. Stay hidden in truth.
Yeah. All right.